transitioning back to school. My name is Christina De Silva. I am an occasional teacher with the Wellington Catholic District School Board, and I'm currently completing my Master of Education degree at Brock University. I'm also the research assistant to Dr. Gallagher, the director of the Brock Learning Lab, as well as this summer I've been working closely with the Brock Learning Lab to help them with their tutoring program, as well as the development of the reading development course for undergraduate students in September. So welcome. We'll be running a series of 5 webinars where we will discuss more closely the back to school plan for September. This series of webinars is called Back to School 101, A New Way of Learning. For this session, we'll be discussing the transition back to school and the different plans available to students for September. So due to the COVID-19 pandemic, Ontario schools have needed to transition to learning online. In March of 2020, Ontario schools closed as a result of the COVID pandemic. This webinar will focus on the various models of learning for September 2020. This module will also discuss the general learning environment students will have the ability to explore in the fall. So in September, there are 2 potential scenarios that school boards will be prepared for. The first one is full-time return to in-person learning. The second one is remote learning. Now, students and parents will have a choice in regards to the type of learning that they decide to choose. So the Ontario Ministry of Education has indicated to all families that students' attendance for in-person learning will be voluntary. So that means students will not be affected in any way if they decide to choose one model or the other, and that students who do not attend in-person learning will be engaged in remote learning. So similar to the experiences that students had in March of 2020, they will be engaged in a similar learning experience. In this webinar, we will look more closely at both learning models in the elementary and secondary schools. So there are 2 options that were discussed. So option 1 is in-person delivery. Option 2 is remote learning / learn at home. So first, we're going to look more closely at the elementary model. So option 1 for the elementary model is a conventional in-person delivery. Now, this means that all elementary students in kindergarten through grade 8 will attend schools 5 days per week, with 300 minutes of instructional time per day. All students will remain in one cohort. So a cohort essentially means that a group of students will be together for the entire day. They will not mix with any other cohort or any other class for student safety, and they will stay with the full cohort for the remainder of the day. This includes recesses and lunch. Now, the Ministry of Education has also noted that there will be changes in breaks, lunches, and recesses. So students can be expected to be staggered, whether that be a different entry time or a different exit time at the end of the day. This will help limit the spread of COVID-19 as well, and limit the amount of individual students have access to throughout the day. Students will be cohorted with one teacher when possible. Again, this may vary from board to board, especially with the specialized teachers, so for art and French, but students will be able to work with their specialized teachers inside their own classrooms. Again, this can vary from board to board, but these are just the general recommendations from the Ministry of Education. As well, indirect and direct support for students will be provided, so this can look differently for every student and for every board, but again, we want to make sure that our students are successful and that these supports are available for all of them. So again, it's similar to a regular school day. However, there'll be enhanced health and safety protocols and maybe shifts in regards to what time school starts and what time school ends. And the aim is to limit the amount of students together. The second option is the remote learning / learn at home. Now, so in-person delivery is completely optional for all families. And as a result of it being optional, remote learning will take place for students that decide this. So all learning materials will be posted online with a combination of synchronous and asynchronous learning. We'll look more closely into what those terms mean later on in the webinar. Attendance along with daily schedules will be provided for students for a 5-hour instructional day. So it will be similar to a regular day at school where students' regular attendance will be taken. Students will be given a daily overview of the subjects that will be taught. And then all learning will be based on the Ontario curriculum as well, but will be based on the overall expectations as well. Times will be indicated when parents feel safe to allow their child to return to school. Essentially, this means that the school board will give you a specific direction on when your child can return to school. So, for example, if you decide to keep your child at home for September, but decide maybe in October, November that you feel that it's safe for your child to return to school, the school board will let you know when the child can enter. Okay, so that's the elementary model. Again, there's 2 options: the in-person delivery with enhanced health and safety protocols, and then this is the option 2, which is full online learning. What's important to note as well, the remote learning can look differently as well as the in-person learning, which can vary from board to board. These are just the general and broad expectations that were put out by the Ministry of Education. Now we're going to look more closely at the secondary model. So again, there are 2 options for the secondary model as well. There's the conventional in-person delivery. So the Ministry of Education has decided to do this a little different in the sense that depending on the designation of the school board, the ministry will determine if in-person or remote learning continues. So essentially, there is a designated school board and a non-designated school board. A designated school board is essentially a list of school boards that the Ministry of Education has put out to say that these school boards need to kind of limit the amount of students going into classrooms because of the COVID-19 numbers and the populations of the school as well. So a designated school board will be notified when it is safe to move to conventional delivery. And for a list of designated school boards, if you go onto the Ministry of Education website and you click the Ontario Back to School Plan, you'll be able to see a list of the designated school boards, and if your child is in a designated school board where they have a specific plan in place. Again, school boards are encouraged to limit contact with students, to create cohorts. So similar to the elementary model, there'll be cohorts to reduce the risk of transmission. Again, no less than 5 hours of instruction should occur with secondary students. The secondary model is different, slightly different in the sense that it's dependent on if a board is designated or non-designated. Again, I would make sure that you check the back to school updates from your local school board to make sure or to be aware of the different back to school plans. Again, there's a second option, which is the remote learning / learn at home option for the secondary panel. Again, online learning will be provided by trained secondary teachers. Another option that's available to students is that they will have access to online courses, which are delivered by TVO, Independent Learning Center. Here, there are over 140 courses that are available in English and in French. Again, the online learning can vary from board to board. However, it is recommended by the Ministry of Education that teachers use Brightspace by D2L, which is also known as Desire to Learn, or a learning management system such as Google Classroom, whichever is recommended or used by their local school board. So what will the in-person model look like? Please visit your local school board website for return to school updates in September. You'll notice that the education for September is always changing. There's always an announcement. So to be sure that you have the most accurate information, I would make sure to go to your local school board website. So we're going to now look at an informative comparison of the remote learning model. So some highlights of remote learning is that meaningful learning can take place. It allows for enhanced reflection because students might not feel overwhelmed with so many students at a time, so they can really have the time to think and reflect on their learning. It's integrated with technology, so reading, writing, all subjects can be integrated with technology, but it's nice that you can still integrate technology, but you can also use pen and paper or use traditional models of learning as well. It's convenient, so it can be done at any time of day. There's also connections with teachers and students because with synchronous learning, you'll notice that some school boards will have Microsoft Teams meetings or Google Meets meetings where teachers and students are able to see themselves face to face. It's also flexible in the sense that it can be done at any time of day as well, but it's also flexible in the sense that teachers and students can collaborate similar to ways that they could in the classroom, but through technology. So considerations of remote learning could be parent schedules. So maybe some parents are working and they don't have the time to work one-on-one with their child. It can be confusing if it's all the information is just posted and it's hard to understand what's expected of you. Wi-Fi connection. So if you're living in a remote area or if your Wi-Fi goes down, sometimes you're not able to access any work. And again, childcare. So who's going to look after your child if you have to work, and etc. So there's many considerations of remote learning. So students will learn remotely in two different ways. So there's asynchronous learning and synchronous learning. So asynchronous learning is when students engage with course content at different times using an online platform. So students can access the lesson and activities on the platform at a time that is flexible to them. The teacher will provide students with activities, and students will be allotted time to complete the tasks. And teachers can also pre-record their lesson explaining content to students. So in a nutshell, asynchronous learning is when it is not live and students can go on and do it at their own time. And this is again using an online platform that is convenient for the school board, or that is reflected by the school board or recommended. So the advantages of asynchronous learning is that it's flexible. It allows students to go back, rewatch if they don't understand something, and they can do it at their own time and pace. They could also do it at their own work location. So maybe it's in their study room, in their bedroom, at a time that is convenient, in a place that is convenient for them. The challenges can be a sense of disconnect with teachers and peers because there's not that face-to-face connection. It requires lots of independent learning and a level of engagement for students, and it may be difficult if the child is not motivated to complete the tasks. Now, synchronous learning is the opposite of asynchronous. So synchronous learning is when students engage in learning at the same time. This is through Google Meets, Microsoft Teams. The teacher sets up the meeting and teaches a lesson, and this requires students to be online at a specific time. So for example, if a teacher says, okay, we're having a math lesson at 11 a.m., the student has to be there at 11 a.m., and then students can chat and interact with their teachers and peers at that time. Now, the advantages of synchronous learning is that they're a real face-to-face lesson with teachers and students can interact and ask questions. Students will also feel a sense of comfort with their teacher present, and there's real meaningful conversation with teachers. And then some teachers can decide to do it every day at that time to give students an understanding of the schedule and to get familiar with the practices of their teacher. So we will continue this um,